Welcome to the I Dare You podcast. I can't wait for this topic and for this guest, Andrew Brodsky. He's an award-winning professor, management consultant, virtual communications expert at the University of Texas in Austin, McCombs School of Business. Great school. Can't wait to bring him in. Let's do it right now. Andrew, welcome to the I Dare You podcast. I cannot believe you're here. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, Andrew, you heard a little bit of my introduction. You have a brand new book. And by the way, when I saw your book, I said, okay, I've got to reach out to Andrew. And you were kind enough to say, let's do it. So I'm just so glad you're here to talk about Ping.
Yeah, it's fun. We connected virtually on this one, somewhat ironically, I guess.
I have to tell you, as soon as I read your book and I was then replaying, you're in my head because I was replaying in my mind, oh my gosh, every email I sent you and how did that come across? And was it rude? Was it too? And so how did I do? Let me know that first.
I think you did great. And I mean, one of the points I talk about a bunch in the book is this idea of the spotlight effect. We're often very self-focused. This is based on some research that was done in the late 90s where they had college students wear embarrassing t-shirts. So they, at the time, Vanilla Ice was like kind of just passing his like fame. And so they had college students wear giant pictures of Vanilla Ice on their t-shirt or Barry Manilow. And they asked those college students, they said to them, how likely do you think it is that other people are going to remember your embarrassing t-shirt? And most college students, as you can imagine, with this embarrassing t-shirt on, are saying, everyone's going to remember this. But in reality, very few people actually noticed their t-shirt whatsoever and remembered it. And this is kind of the same thing that often happens with our communication. We become so self-focused on it that we're worried about every little component of it. And yes, communication does matter in the longer term as additive effects. Important interactions matter, which we'll get into. But it causes this thing where we worry a little bit too much about each one. And if you think about it this way, when I got the message from you, I'm like, oh, here's an important person, a podcast host. I'm guessing, he wants me to respond right away. Yes. But in reality, you're probably like, I have hundreds of emails right now. I don't care if Andrew gets back to me for a couple of weeks.
I didn't. You're right.
Yeah. And so the idea here is that we often are the center of our own stories. So we're a little bit more worried about our communication in some cases than we need to be.
Well, that's good. Yeah, you framed it up perfectly. Okay, with that as a launch pad, I do need to go back to your story because I was just on TikTok last night, speaking of virtual communications, and there was a TikTok video, and it was something like they had a beautiful video of someone walking the beach, and I think it was said something like this: "Today's generation has therapists. Our generation had Barry Manilow," which. For me, I am 58 years old, so I related. You may not even know who Barry Manilow is, Andrew, but he was something.
Yeah, no, I do. I didn't overlap as much, but very familiar.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so the name of your book is Ping, The Secrets of Successful Virtual Communication. And I read the book, and it is phenomenal. What I appreciate most about it is evidence-based. I mean, there's a lot of people, including myself, who could write a book about communication. It's from our own experience and anecdotes. But man, did you bring the research. One thing I want to ask you about right away, chapter 1, you have a quote. It is, once a new technology rolls over you, if you're not a part of the steamroller, you're part of the road. That was a quote from Stuart Brand. Why that particular quote? I think you chose that for a reason, I'm assuming.
Yeah. When it comes to this tech, there's always people who resist. We want the old way of doing things. I only ever want to interact in person. I never want to do anything else. And the problem is that's a strategy that only really works if you're a billionaire. If you're someone who like everyone has to just do whatever you want, fine. But for the rest of us, we have to be able to adapt and innovate as things move so that we can interact with people in a whole different ways. We have a client who uses a certain type of communication, or a supervisor, or manager, or anyone else. We need to understand how to use these things most effectively.
That's true. I chuckled because you mentioned the billionaire, and actually, in my previous work experience, I worked for a billionaire, and that's why I chuckle. You're right. Unless you are that billionaire, yeah, these rules apply. All right. So now your story, though, I did not expect your story, to be honest with you. I'm going to let you tell it, but why this interest in virtual communication for you?
Sure. So I actually became interested in this topic at an early age. So as some background, when I was 16 years old, I'd been feeling sick for a couple weeks. I thought I had a bad cold. I ended up in the emergency room because my parents were concerned about me. We couldn't get a primary doctor appointment. And in the emergency room, the doctors, they drew some blood and they saw that I had a white blood cell count of over 100,000.
Oh,
And for those who are familiar with this, it pretty much means you have leukemia guaranteed. So here I was, 16 years old in the emergency room, and a doctor told me, you have cancer,
oh
to me and my
my.
parents. And you kind of detach often at these times, and I did. And maybe as a coping mechanism, because I couldn't absorb the information at the present, I was wondering, what is it like to have to tell a 16-year-old that they have cancer? And then over the next couple years, radiation chemotherapy, I did a bone marrow transplant where I had to stay in one of those bubble-like rooms. And so I had to interact with people a lot from a distance at the time. Luckily, everything went smoothly. I've been cancer-free now for 20 years.
All right.
But I was left with a little bit of immune deficiency. That means that in the current age of everything going around, I'm one of those people who has to be a little bit more careful when they say, if it's no big deal unless you're immune compromised. I unfortunately fall in that bucket. So for me, understanding how we can communicate better virtually, what is the research on this? What are the questions we don't know the answers to? Not only was something I felt was valuable to other people, but was very personally relevant to me because it's become one of the main ways in which I interact with others.
Yeah. Thank you for your story. I'm so glad. I mean, 20 years. And so I imagine, how often do you go back to the doctor to check in and to see how you're doing? What's your cadence on that?
Yeah, so for cancer stuff, not that often. For immune deficiency stuff, that's always an interesting one when you have something like that. So a little bit more frequently on that one. And the other thing too about this book is there's also the question about why did I put out this book right now? So I've
Yeah.
been researching this topic for well over a decade at this point. And for me, the reason I did it right now is that there's so many conversations going on about, is remote work good? Is hybrid work better? Is in-office work best? And what all these conversations are missing is that no matter where you work from, we are now all virtual communicators. The old way of being in the office was whenever you had a question, you'd go over to your coworker's cubicle or office and ask them. Now in offices, even if someone's only a few feet away, we send an instant message or a Slack message or an
Right.
email. And it's not just bad because the old way was you'd interrupt anyone anytime that you had a question. The new way now is that you send these text-based communications so that they can respond when they're done with whatever task they're on. But we're all virtual communicators, and it's being missed in this conversation of remote work versus not. It's that this technology now is just the way we interact. How should we be using it?
That's true. No, it's a timely topic. It's the right message at the right time. I do want to give you kudos here. I mean, the reviews for your book are unbelievable. I mean, it's been out now for a few months, and so I'm assuming it's hitting the mark, and that's a question in a moment. But there's a review here from Adam Grant. Not too bad. Not too bad. He writes, finally, a science-based guide to having better conversations by text, email, phone, video, and yes, even social media. Andrew is one of the world's foremost experts in virtual communication. His book is brimming with surprising insights and useful tips. It's a resource we need for avoiding misunderstandings and making genuine connections. I love Adam Grant, but at the very end, I find myself thinking, really? He said genuine connections.
Mm-hmm.
So are you telling me that with the virtual communications, we truly can make genuine connections? I am skeptical. What do you got?
Yes. The answer, I always get this question, is in-person interactions the best for X or for Y? And the thing I like to tell people to think about is that humans have been interacting by most standards for well over 100,000 years. When it comes to virtual interactions, it's only been very recent history. We haven't evolved to be naturally good at this.
That's
So it
true.
requires taking more initiative and being more thoughtful about how we approach this. But as a quick example to make this point, think about two friends that you have. One, let's say you see 3 times a year. So once every 4 months for about 3 hours in person. The other friend, you send one text message back and forth every single day. Which friend are you probably closer to? The one you text every single day, once back and forth, or the one you see in person for 3 hours every 4 months?
Yeah,
And
of
most people probably will say the one you text every day.
course. For me, yes.
Yeah. And if you think about it, a single text every day will probably be less time than the 3 hours you spend in person once every 4 months.
True.
So if you think about the time communicating, it's the same. And it's less rich when you're doing it via text and in person. But it's a frequency here that's more important, that matters. And that's one of the advantages of virtual communication is you can have that frequency a lot more easily. So it's more about being thoughtful. Yes, a single text and a single in-person interaction, the in-person interaction will reign supreme generally for closeness. But when you think about it the way I framed it and the overall amount of time, you start to realize that it doesn't only have to be in person, and there are strengths we can leverage of different tools.
That's a really good reframe for me. My bias is in person. By the way, I didn't tell you this before we started recording. I'm in corporate America, and I have this podcast on the side, and so I'm in meetings all the time. I'm in an office. We said no to work from home. It's
Mm-hmm.
all, and so just so you know, that's where my conversations are coming from. Now, you mentioned though richness, and I want to explore that because in your book you talk a lot about that. And what do you mean by that in these different levels of communication richness? And what do we need to know about that?
Good question. So richness is, simply put, this idea of like how similar is something to in-person interactions. And there's a variety of ways that researchers characterize richness, but the two main ones are often called something like cue variety, which is how similar are the nonverbal behaviors to in person, what are the variety of them, are there lots, are there little, and synchronicity. So how real time is the communication? Email, very asynchronous. It's not real time. In person, completely synchronous. But even small differences on cue variety and synchronicity can meaningfully change the way we interact. As an example, video and in person. Many people at first glance would say, well, they're both completely synchronous. They're the same. But video has very slight data transfer speed lags. So it's very slightly less synchronous than in person, which is part of what causes that thing that we do in Zoom and other video calls where we're interrupting each other. There are awkward pauses. It's the no, you go first, because even those slight lags can alter the flow of conversation. So even tiny differences on richness, cue variety, synchronicity can alter the way that we interact.
It's a good point. And those who have listening, I've stepped on you a couple of times just because of that. And so I
Mm-hmm.
apologize to you for that. It's not, it is certainly not
I'm
on,
stepping on you too at the same time. It's good. It's part of the fun of this, right?
exactly, not on purpose. All right. So now I've got a couple of specific things on this that I just have got to know. You made a point though with text messages that text messages, yes, it's about the person sending it, but we need to have more of a thought of who's receiving it and their perspective on it. And I think I'm inferring here, you mentioned that text messages can somehow be viewed as more negative in connotation. So tell me more about that, because I think this is a thread throughout the entire book.
So this is about text-based communication. So this is email, instant message, Slack, actual phone texting.
Yes.
And the issue is that research shows that often it's interpreted more negatively than intended. One of the activities I like to do when I'm coaching executives or I'm teaching MBA students is based on a research study that was originally done at Stanford. And in this study, they would take pairs of people, and you can try this activity yourself with a friend, a partner, whoever, a kid, whoever. And they had one of the two people tap out a song on the desk with just their fist, a single hand. And they asked that person, how likely is it that the other person's going to guess that song? And people were like, oh, yeah, they'll probably get it. It was easy, 80, 90%. But in reality, very few people guessed that song. And the reason is that when we're tapping the song ourselves, we hear the music in our heads.
Sure.
It seems obvious. But the other person is just hearing tap, 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 tap. And they don't hear the same music. And the same is true, and the parallel has been drawn by researchers to emotion in email. When we write an email or instant message, we hear the emotion in our heads. It seems obvious. And research shows that people are heavily overconfident about their ability to relay emotion over email. They think, oh, yeah, the other person's going to get this, no problem. But the other person doesn't get it.
Right.
And the takeaway of this is that it's important to engage in a kind of perspective taking And one example of the strategies that's been found in research that's effective is when you have a message that has emotion in it that might be misinterpreted or it's important. What they had participants do in these studies is they took the message and they had them read it out loud in the opposite tone they intended. So if it's
That's good.
serious, read it as sarcastic. If it's sarcastic, read it as serious. Happy is angry, vice versa. And when people did that, they were like, oh, whoa, this wasn't as clear as I intended. It sounded clear in my head, but now that I'm reading it in the opposite tone, I'm realizing that, well, it kind of makes sense in that opposite tone too. And this is where we go wrong, is by not taking this extra step and realizing what is obvious in our head is not the same to the other person.
Really good points. I didn't think of it that way. So thank you for that. And I want to go further in that. Now, Ping, first off, I want everyone to purchase this book. It is so evidence-based. If you're in leadership, corporate America, young leader, executive CEO, HR, I mean, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is fantastic. So I don't want to give away the book, but the PING is the acronym. N, if I have this right from memory, nonverbal. Do I have that right?
Yep, you got it right.
All right. So now I never thought of email. First off, nonverbal communication. I know what that is. You're looking at me right now. It's my I'm looking at you, my hands and all that. But wait a minute, you're telling me when I send emails and digital communication is also part of nonverbals? That kind of shocked me a little bit. Tell us more about how nonverbals fit into this.
There's a whole bunch of research on this, which I go over, but as some examples, typos in my own research with Haley Blunden at American University have been shown to relay emotion. There's research that shows time of day you send a message relays power. Even in video calls, there's other things that we don't have to think about when we're in person. If we were in person, I just would look you in the eyes and we'd have eye contact. When we're in video, there's a question of, do I look at my webcam, which is right in between my two monitors? Do I look at you on my monitor? So I'm looking at you, but to you, it looks like I'm looking to the side because my webcam's, on top of my screen or on the side. And so or your backgrounds, what should you have in a background versus not? And there's a lot of research on this too. So I can hit on any of the ones we kind of talked about here, but there's so many different things that communicate information virtually that alter how others perceive us and how effective our communication is that we don't realize because it just doesn't come as naturally to us.
Never thought of it that way. Let's take one of those. In spirit of nonverbal communication, when the cameras are on, what does our background say about us, or about how can we master our nonverbals when we are on Zoom calls? Let's start there.
Yeah. So let's start with eye contact because I mentioned it, and then I'll go into backgrounds. Eye contact is important. It's a little bit dumb on video because to maintain eye contact with the other person, so it looks like I'm looking at you, I need to look at my webcam rather than where you are on my screen. There's ways to fix this to make it easier. As you could drag the other person's video display to right under your webcam. There's hanging webcams that'll stick on your screen or teleprompter webcams. But the reason why I say it's dumb is that eye contact on video calls only provides the illusion of engagement. Right now, you don't know that I don't have my dinner recipe up on my computer that I'm looking at. It looks like because I'm looking at you, I'm communicating to you.
Right.
But in reality, for most people, looking at the other person means looking at your webcam, so you're not looking at them. But regardless, because we're so used to eye contact in person, you need to maintain that eye contact in any way you can with the person you're interacting with, meaning looking at your webcam or moving things around so it's near your webcam. And research has shown in job interviews, this matters.
Ooh, tell me.
How the other person evaluates you is based on your eye contact during the call. And the one workaround that I recommend for that is, let's say as an example, you're taking notes, handwritten notes during a call. Usually in person, that would be great. It shows you really care. But during a video call, it looks like you're looking down on your cell phone because they can't see the pad in front of you. So the way around this is just to be more explicit about it and say, hey, I'm just jotting down notes here on my pad. So they know. So filling in that gap is really key. So they don't assume you're just looking at your phone if that's happening.
Good point. So really, it's always thinking about that other person is one of the key takeaways for me on that.
Exactly. And then quickly for backgrounds, there's two perspectives. One is you want to keep it professional. And research has shown things like plants and bookshelves tend to be a lot more effective than blurred backgrounds. And the lowest is those novelty backgrounds. In this study, they used a walrus and an iceberg. The
Wait a minute.
other
Hold
perspective,
on. Hold on.
yeah.
Time out. What did
Yeah.
we use on that? I want to capture that one. I
Yeah,
love
yeah. So it was a walrus on an iceberg was what they used for that novelty background. And you be surprised. I mean, for my MBA classes, or even when I'm doing corporate training,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who are like, let me use a funny background. And in certain contexts, that's definitely fine. Like with a team you have ongoing relationships with, where professionalism isn't necessarily as important. Sure. But I see a lot of novelty backgrounds in situations where I might not recommend them. But so it's picking the right one for the right context.
Gosh, we could have a whole. You know what? I did it to you again. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna edit all this out. So
But
go good to
yeah.
start wherever you want.
Yeah. And I go on too long sometimes. So feel free to cut
No,
down
this
what
is
I'm
great.
saying.
This is great.
Um, and and the other side of the background discussion is something that can make the other person feel like they relate to you. So there's research that shows that if you have something like a number one dad mug in the background and the other person's a parent, they feel like they trust you more because they feel more similar to you. And it provides a little bit of a window into who you are. So my background personally, having read way too much of this research, I've got some books. I actually have
Sure.
a picture of my rescue dogs behind me because that's a good way to have conversation and let them know, hey, there's a human being here as well. So it's that mix of professional, but also having some window into who I am. So I don't just seem like a boring bookshelf.
Right. Well, I love that. And by the yes, now that you said that, I read that in your bio about rescue dogs, and so now I have to know. To your point, I really do have to know. I love dogs. So, what are the
Yeah.
names of your dogs?
Our dogs' names are Tater and Minnie. One is like a collie dachshund something mix, and the other is like a collie lab golden. We don't know. They're both like lots of different mutts, but they're very adorable, the two of them.
That's so good. My daughter has a dog she got from a shelter, and beautiful dog, and the best dog ever. I had him for a walk on Sunday right around the park, and someone stopped and said, "Hey, I love your dog. What breed is it?" And I said, "You name it, it's in there." Well, what a great dog! What a
Yeah.
great dog. Well, good. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, now quick story. So one thing I've observed on the backgrounds is when I have work Zooms, there
Hmm.
seems to be a theme. I'm having a little bit of fun here, but a lot of the guys from IT, they will
Hmm.
have the most flamboyant backgrounds. It's almost like a Star Trek, Star Wars,
Hmm.
Jedi thing going on. The sales guys will try to get cute. It's always about a Hawaii anyway, but it
Yeah.
does tell you a lot about people, and it's a lot of fun to see.
Yeah, and there's different norms with groups, like what they're wearing too. Like usually you see IT wear different clothes in sales and all that. And you see
Right.
that also how it plays out in backgrounds similarly.
Yeah. Really, really great point. So just so you know, everybody, so I'm looking now, and you hit it exactly. So right now, my instinct is to look directly at you right there, and so now
Mhm.
my gaze went from away from the camera, but I'm looking at the camera because I may use this reel on Instagram, and so I go back and forth. But when I'm just really into the conversation, when I forget we're on video, it's just right here. I mean, I feel
Mhm.
like you're right here, right on the table. So
Mhm.
yeah, really, really helpful. Okay, you brought up typos. Talk to me about typos in digital communications or virtual communications. What do
Mhm.
we need to know about this? Because I think it's so important. You brought it up.
Yeah, so this is from research I did with Haley Blunden. Typos, we found three different effects of typos. The first one is going to be pretty obvious to everyone. They make you look dumb. They make you look less intelligent in contexts where they're not expected. So like if you're just texting with friends and you'd always, it's not a situation where you should be grammatically correct. It's not less important, but in a work email, they make you look less intelligent on average. We also found that typos relay emotion in a way, but not specific emotion. It's like putting your fist up in the air. That doesn't necessarily mean you're or a certain emotion, but if you're angry, it makes you look angrier. If you're excited, it makes you look more excited. Typos act as emotion amplifiers. So in happy emails, they make you seem happier. In angry emails, they make you seem angrier. And the idea behind this was that people see them and they're like, oh, the person's so, emotional that they're not proofing their message. They don't care. And then there was a third effect, which is the most interesting one, which relates to this broader theory on nonverbal behavior and text-based communication. And that was in the context of emotional messages, typos don't harm perceptions of intelligence as much. And what does that mean? That means that if you've got a neutral email, typos are going to make you look meaningfully less intelligent. But in a happy or angry email, it doesn't hurt intelligence as much. And the reason behind this, the deeper finding, is that when we receive a message virtually, we're all searching for reasons. We're making attributions of behavior because there's so many gaps to fill in. We can't see the person, we can't hear them. So we're looking for any cues that can give us information about that. And so typos might be a cue of intelligence or emotion. But when we have emotion, we're like, oh, it's emotion, not intelligence. And this relates to studies that were separately done that showed that for people who have sent from my iPhone in their email signature, the penalty for typos was decreased.
That's good.
And when you know that someone's from a foreign culture, research has shown that the penalty for grammatical errors and typos is also decreased. And the idea here is that when we have a reason for a mistake or whatever else, we're like, okay, that makes sense. But when we're just searching for a reason with limited information, we often make negative attributions of the other person. They're less intelligent, they don't care about me, whatever else. And the takeaway here, the practical takeaway is it's useful to make the implicit more explicit. Actually talk about what's going on so that you give the other people the information to make the correct attributions about you. As an example here.
Yeah.
Let's say you are texting on the go or you're emailing on the go, and you know your email is probably going to have some typos in it.
Yes.
You could say in your message, saying, I'm emailing you as I'm walking or I'm slacking you as I'm walking between meetings, but I want to get to you ASAP. And then say the information. And the benefit of that is it's like, okay, they're like excited. They want to get to me quickly to be useful. It's not that they're sending me a haphazard message that's a mess. And the same could be used too about why you communicate over a low effort mode. If you're sending someone an email or instant message when you should be calling them because something big happened in their life. And normally you would call them for that, but it's just the time is not right for you. You could say, hey, I'm going to call you later, but I wanted to get to you as soon as I heard. I am so excited for you. As opposed to if you're on the receiving end of that without that communication, and one of your great friends or colleagues just sent you an instant message of something big deal that happened in your life, you'd be like, this person doesn't care about me. Like, this is so low effort.
So true. And low effort. I think you described it perfectly. I on the receiving end of a voice memo or a text message where someone said, hey, I'm moving fast, getting on a flight, apologize for the typos. That one statement, I feel special.
Yeah.
I do. I thought this guy's going on a flight and he thought he's got to get back to me. Not that I expected it, but I think that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah. As opposed to just getting an email riddled with typos and you're like, is this person lazy? Do they not care about me? Like they couldn't even bring themselves to like write a half decent email. You're kind of left wondering if the other person doesn't fill in those gaps for you.
Yeah, that is so true. I received a text message at about 10:45 at night from someone who I don't work with, but I'm affiliated with the company. I mean, we have a relationship, an acquaintance, a vendor. All right, sent me a text about 10:45. It had several typos in it, and it was a little bit chippy. And I can tell you, I leapt to a lot of conclusions. One of them was, I think he's been drinking. In other words, but I have no idea if that's right or not. But now, shame on me, because now I'm thinking this guy who's been really good up to this point, does he have a drinking problem? I mean, we can leap to certain things that may or may not be true, can't we?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you mentioned alcohol, so I have to talk about a study involving alcohol and virtual communication. There's a lot of research on Zoom fatigue. So the idea that being on camera is exhausting. You're seeing yourself, you're looking if you have like broccoli in your teeth. It's like, it's stressful having this camera pointed at you and looking at yourself. And it's just tiring. And so one set of researchers was curious if they had participants drink some alcohol during a video call, if they would become more social and look more at the other person's screen as opposed to their own. Good news, bad news, depending on how you look at it. Drinking alcohol did not decrease self-focus in these things. So I do not recommend drinking alcohol during Zoom or video calls because it turns out it doesn't really help with actually losing that focus on yourself and being more social.
That's so good. So I don't have to try that. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so I feel some of this is actually my own personal interests and grievances, so I apologize for this, but I know it's also in your book. You talk a lot about also. Let me collect my thoughts. I'm going to go back on this. I don't have a lot of time with you, and I apologize.
No worries. I got till 10, so there's no
Okay,
rush.
all right, yeah. I may edit this out for obvious reasons here, but
Of course. And you can cut down anything I've said, by the way, too.
yeah, no, you're dialed in. I love this. Okay, quick question. Let me back up. So, Andrew, something happened to me. I've never told anyone this, but I was at a work. This is in the spirit of voice,
Hmm.
and I want to talk about the voice memos. I was at a meeting, and it was really loud, and a lot of things were happening. And frankly, I just didn't have time. But there was something happening on the stage that I was backstage, and something was not going right. And someone I work with was across the way, and she asked me the question. She said, "Hey, should we tell so and so to?" And it was a specific thing to do differently on the stage. And I
Hmm.
was moving fast, and it was loud, and I didn't have my glasses on, so I just quickly grabbed my phone and I did a voice text, and I said, "No, unless you fight me really hard, let's just leave it right where it is." Okay.
Uh-huh.
It picked up a different F word in that. And as soon as I hit send, my eye caught what happened, and I sprinted the 100 yards, and I apologized profusely. So that's the one of the most embarrassing things that can happen for me on voice memos. But talk to me about your research on voice memos, and what do we need to know about these? This I think it's more increasing use of voice memos.
Memos are kind of funny because if you think about like the worst mode of communication, the one that people hate the most, especially younger people, it's voicemails.
Amen.
So you call them and you leave them a voicemail. But voice memos are super cool. There, a lot of younger people are using them, and they're both asynchronous voice communication. They are effectively the same, but voicemail is bad, voice notes good. And it's just interesting to think about how we attach norms to these different types of things, even when often effectively they're not that different from one another. But when it comes to voice in my research, audio only interactions, and others' research, there's a bunch of studies that show that we tend to heavily underutilize audio interactions. Yeah, we tend to stick to the extremes. So we think, okay, this is something where it's really important to see the person, so let's use video. Or it's something that's, we don't need video, so let's just use email or instant message. The reason audio is so useful, as an example, I conducted 3 studies with managers, negotiators, and parents and teachers in a set of 11 international schools in Vietnam. And I'll get to that sample in a second. But it looked at 2 different types of authenticity over virtual communication. One is true authenticity. So we mean what we feel. We're expressing happiness and we actually feel happy. The other type is something called surface acting. Surface acting is when you're expressing an emotion you don't necessarily feel. And there's often good reasons for this. So if something really good happened in your coworker's life, they got a promotion or something, but you're in a bad mood because you had a horrible commute, you spilled something on yourself, you had a fight with your partner, you don't want to go to that coworker and be like, "Congrats, I wish I could be happy for you, but I spilled coffee on myself." Like, that's just bad. Or on the
Yeah.
other side, if you're in the mortgage industry and you need to deny a customer a loan, or you need to lay off employees and you need to be sympathetic, but you are in a great mood because your partner just accepted your marriage proposal and you're engaged. You don't want to go to that employee that you're laying off saying, you're being laid off, but I am so excited. I am now engaged. That's the worst thing you could do. So this is surface acting. And the sample of teachers is relevant because at a private school, the parents are customers. And these teachers have to tell the parents that their little angel is failing the class. And these teachers might be very frustrated at this horrible student, but they need to go with the smile, that service with the smile.
Mm-hmm.
And in the set of studies, I found 2 things. One, for true, authentic emotion, it's best to use richer modes of communication, like video and in person. You want to let that authenticity shine through. But for surface acting, where you have to fake it, which happens all the time in the workplace, we can't just say whatever we're feeling.
No.
For those people, when they're surface acting, we're more likely to be using email because it felt safest. We can hide all our emotions, it's low effort, but that was the absolute wrong choice. Because on the recipient side, getting some kind of emotion via email feels very inauthentic because it is so low effort to be seen as sending an email as opposed to calling or talking to the person in person about it. But for them, what was best was using audio interactions like phone or cameras off video calls like Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because audio has the benefit of seeming much higher effort than email, but it masks what's called nonverbal leakage. So when we're face to face or via video, we can see the other person, and occasionally things leak through. Maybe there's a grimace, maybe you look away, maybe something accidentally comes through. Whereas with audio, all you worry about is your voice, tone of voice, and your words. So there's a lot less to monitor. There's a lot lower likelihood that the other person will realize you're faking it, but it's seen as very high effort, unlike email. So audio interactions are often that sweet spot where it seems better than email, but it's not as intense as a visual, video, in-person interaction.
That's great. Great perspective. And those findings, those are fascinating to me because I often wonder, Andrew, if I'm being, if it's my issue or not. But when I get a voice text, and I want to make sure I've got the right thing. So it shows up on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
It is a memo from someone instead of, they chose to send their voice instead of an email or a text. I love hearing their voice, number one, except I think to myself, holy smokes, I'm looking at a 5-minute voice memo.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can't just read it in a meeting. Now I've got to be somewhere quiet where I can. So that's, speaking of the recipient of that, I also view that as an inconvenience as opposed to, come on, let's be more efficient with this communication. And you would say to me, what?
So this is an important mindset that I focus on in the whole book. And it's not just voice memos. When people often communicate to me, I would say, let's talk about book publicity. I've luckily had a ton of it, lots of journalists reaching out. They never ask me how I want to communicate. No one ever emails me and say, hey, do you want to do this over email? Do you prefer a phone call? Do you prefer video? I'd say maybe 1% of the time does the person ask me what I prefer. And I have strong preferences for many things. Like this conversation, I'm talkative. If you were to email me these questions and each one I respond with multiple paragraphs, it would take me like a week to write up.
Of course.
But having this real time is much more efficient. But often, journalists will just say, okay, let's do a video call. Let's do a telephone call. And same in business. When someone emails you to set up a meeting, they just send a Zoom link or a Teams link with video. Right. They don't ask your preference. And voice notes, for instance, as this example you gave, they can be good for showing a higher level of effort. But the downside is they're a pain to listen to. And if you need to get a piece of information weeks later from the middle of that voice note, it's hard to do. Whereas if you got that in the email and you go back a week later and say, oh, I just need to check what they said in the email, it takes you 2 seconds. In a voice note, it's a pain. So there's 2 things you want to think about in these situations. 1, what's your most important goal in the interaction? Is it showing effort? Is it allowing the other person to have ease of access to this information at a future point? And then the second thing is, again, to get to this perspective taking, think about, well, what does the other person prefer? What do they like? And when I consult with organizations, I often have teams have these conversations more explicitly amongst each other, because usually amongst a team, people have very different communication preferences. So you have these weird things happening where you've got a manager insisting on email, someone else sending Slacks to the manager. People don't respond to each other in timely manners because they each have their own preferences.
Right.
So actually engaging this kind of communication norming is important for teams, because otherwise you have all these wires that are being crossed and missed in the process. So voice notes can be good in certain situations, but you want to make sure that it meets your goal and that it's good for the other person too in that situation.
Great. Good. Really, again, really good. I love how the research backs up so much of this. I want to go further on this, a little more specific things. I'm so glad you're here because you can now end this debate, meetings versus email. What does the research show on this? Is there a definitive answer, sir?
I wish I could say there's one best mode of communication, although it would have made it for a short book for me. Yeah. But it depends. An example I gave, like this conversation you and I are having, lots of back and forth. Much better to do synchronously via meetings. If you're just relaying information to 20 people, better via email. And if you're thinking about meetings, research shows that they're more engaging with fewer people and shorter meetings. And you're going to want to use them when there's more of this interaction. And there's a lot of organizations that go to one extreme or another, and I see it going really badly. What I see going best is twofold. One, experimenting a lot and seeing what works and not just sticking with something because this is what we've always done. And two is learning and understanding the research and all this better. One of my favorite examples is brainstorming. Everyone loves to, sit around a whiteboard and feels energizing. We're jotting down ideas there as a group. But the science on this shows that for brainstorming, the initial stages are better done separately via text.
Is that right?
Yeah. So it's three things. First, when everyone's staring at you in the room, you feel a little weird saying something that's really divergent, an idea that's really different than everyone else. And then secondarily, when everyone's saying their ideas out loud in the room, you hear an idea and your brain gets stuck on it. Whereas when you're doing it separately, you tend to all have more unique ideas. And lastly, in meetings, and this is a simple productivity equation, let's say you have 10 people and you want them to each come up with 20 ideas. To have 10 people say 20 ideas in a meeting, it would probably take hours because they have to go sequentially and there's more words to be said for each. If you just had 10 people type up 20 ideas, they can all do it at the same time. And it's much, much more productive. The latter stages of brainstorming, when you're deciding on an idea as a group, that you want a meeting for because there's a lot of back and forth on that as opposed to that idea generation stage, which is better done separately via text. So this is kind of an example where it depends on what your goal is, what's going on in that, and understanding about the different strengths and weaknesses of the mode to make sure that you're maximizing your outcome.
It's good. Once again, putting a little more thought into it. That's one of the takeaways from this interview, but also from your book is, look, it's a brand new world. As you mentioned, 100,000 years we've been doing it one way, but putting a little more thought into this. And it's not, and for me, I'm always more in person and always defaulting to that. But no, I think this is eye-opening for me being in corporate America. I know for a lot of our listeners as well. One more rapid fire question, sir, and that has to do with emojis. Use them or not? What is the research showing on this?
That's probably one of the most popular questions I get. And the research shows that it's mixed. Sometimes it makes you look less confident. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it makes you look warm. Sometimes it doesn't. The advice I give is to engage in something called a language mimicry. So what the science on this shows is that when you take your cues from the other person, so if they use emojis, use them too. If they use exclamation marks, use them too. If they use certain business jargon, use it too. They're more likely to trust you. And that's because we tend to trust people who are similar to us. So when someone communicates like us, we're like, I get them. And we also think we're great communicators. Like, I'm a great communicator. So when someone communicates like me, I'm like, wow, they're a great communicator too, because I'm a great communicator.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want to go overboard with this though and do like Simon Says where you're copying everything. And if you're someone who's high in power, don't mimic someone low in power because it's condescending. But the general strategy I recommend is don't go with an overarching rule of emojis or not. Look at what the other person is doing. And if they do it, match them.
Good. I work with someone who uses exclamation points a lot. In fact, I have this email saved. There was an email saved where it was about 3 paragraphs long. And I kid you not, it was 90% of the sentences had an exclamation point.
Yeah. One of my favorite interviews I've done on this was with a colonel who's the head of the leadership department at West Point. There was a 3-star general who texted him some emojis. And like, this is like the situation where you think there wouldn't be any emojis. Like, it's between like the colonel and the 3-star general in the military. But then he texted emojis back and like, this is now a thing they do. And they like are texting American flags to each other and thumbs up. And it actually strengthened the relationship by engaging in this kind of mimicry and just matching. It was like, it's weird at first, but then he was like, it kind of really helped the relationship that I was communicating at this person's level and the way they like to do it.
There you go. That is so good. All right, Andrew, you have given so many interviews in support of this book. And is there a question or a piece of research that you have just not been able to tap into? Maybe another question, Andrew, is what is the most interesting part of this research that just lights you up that you think we should know about?
For me, the AI in the future is one of
Mm,
the biggest areas on this because more and more people are using AI tools to communicate for them. Whether that's on, they're drafting an email for me and I send it, or some of the crazier cases that are starting to happen is people have AI videos of themselves communicating on their behalf during video meetings.
no.
Yeah, I
What?
strongly would not recommend that. But there's actually there's some people are interviewing for positions who aren't who they are, but they're from a foreign country potentially interviewing for US position. There's some crazy stuff going on. But
Okay. All
for
right.
what's relevant for most people is, should we use AI to write our emails for us? And my advice is no, generally for the important ones, because every so often someone's going to realize that you used AI. Maybe you spoke about something in person over the weekend. Like they mentioned their family had the stomach bug all weekend and it was bad. And then you accidentally copy and paste an email that starts with, I hope you had a great weekend, exclamation mark.
Right.
Or it uses words you don't use or whatever else. And if they realize you faked it once, they're going to question whether every single interaction with you virtually has been AI. And then they're going to question, should I be interacting with this person at all if I'm just communicating with AI? So while it's a great tool for editing, brainstorming, and low stakes repeat interactions, I would be strongly wary of recommending using AI to write your communication for you in important contexts.
You talk about a brand new world, something we've never experienced before. This is it. And I think that is that's really a very wise piece of advice. I recently made that mistake, actually. I wrote an email and I put it into AI to improve it. And sure enough, it improved it. And I was in a hurry. So I copied and pasted. And one of the phrases there is there, instead of saying, hey, I'm really looking forward to seeing you, which is the
Mm-hmm.
way I would talk. Okay. I think it
Mm-hmm.
said, I am ridiculously over the moon about getting together. It's like, never in my life have I said that. And so it gave me up. And so it's just like, oh, Darren, come on. Right. That's what you're talking about.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's high stakes. And oftentimes it feels easier to do it, but the downsides are quite high if you get caught. And someone thinks it's an important, if you, someone, for instance, you're offering your condolences to someone who lost someone. If they
Ooh,
see you wrote an AI email, and that's an extreme example, but even in the workplace, if they
right.
wanted some important piece of information from you and you send them an AI generated email, they're going to feel like they are not important to you.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
No, isn't that the truth? All right, Andrew, let me back up. So, Andrew, we've spent a good amount of time talking about parts of your book. I would love to, if you're game for this, I'd love to have you back on later to talk about some different angles on this in the workplace because it is so rich. But for the audience, what is it that you would hope that someone would think or do differently as a result of reading this incredible book?
The one thing I'd like people to do is to question their assumptions. We get so overwhelmed by calendars full of meetings, inboxes full of emails and instant messages that we often don't take the time to stop and ask, is there a way I can do this better? And even though it does take a little bit of time to consider, is this the best approach? Research has shown that by using virtual communication more strategically, it can improve your productivity, it can improve your relationships, and it can improve your well being because you can reduce the overall amount of communication you have and you can disconnect more outside of the work. So you don't feel as attached to your smartphone constantly.
It's good. That's a great goal to have. The name of the book, everyone, is Ping, The Secrets of Successful Virtual Communication. You got to get this book. Andrew, what's the best way to follow you and everything that you have going on?
Great. So I post most frequently on LinkedIn. And then my company website is pinggroup.org, where I do consulting and training. And I hope you all enjoy the book.
We will. Andrew, before I ask for your I Dare You challenge, that's coming up in a moment, but one in your bio, you were selected as one of the world's 40 best business school professors under 40. You're a humble guy, and yet I have to know, what is it that you do with your students that you think sets you apart from others? Is it intentional, or what kind of approach do you have? That's really cool.
Yes, I actually got that when I was one of the only few remote professors teaching at my university. So
Hmm.
everyone had come back in person, but I was still hanging out remotely a little bit because of my immune deficiency and things still weren't fully resolved worldwide. And it's interesting that being one of the only remote professors, I was able to at my university, I was able to get this. And the trick is figuring out how to leverage these tools effectively. So with teaching, Zoom calls, it's so easy to get distracted, to lose attention. So I'm making sure to mix things up a lot while I'm teaching. Interactive activities, lecture, video, discussions, breakout rooms, constantly shifting from one type of way of interacting with students to another during class is really important to keeping things engaging. And then on top of that is explaining the research well, but being willing to have students challenge that research. I like to treat my MBA students actually like PhD students, where I have them question the research and think it through and say, well, maybe this isn't right in these situations. And bringing them to that level, I found helps students get a lot more value out of the class.
That's really cool. Well, congratulations. I think it's really a great honor, especially virtually as well. That's dynamite. All right, Andrew, it's time. At the end of every episode, I ask my guests, what is your I Dare You challenge for all of us? It is the one thing that we could do or try to live a better life. What do you think, sir?
I dare you to, it's going to feel awkward, but try and have an explicit conversation with the people you interact with around communication response expectations. And this relates to research on the email urgency bias that shows that when you receive an email from someone else, especially after hours, we tend to expect they want a response a lot more quickly than they actually do, which creates a lot of stress for us.
Yes.
So maybe if you're in a team and organization, you agree to something like, we respond to emails within 24 hours, instant or Slack messages during the workday within 2 hours, so you don't have to interrupt your task. And if there's something urgent, maybe we'll do a text or we'll do some way of doing it. And you'll find if you're willing to have those really awkward conversations about things that sort of seem obvious, it'll benefit you because you no longer need to be constantly checking your inbox because you know if there's something important, you'll hear that text chime if that's what you decide. And you can detach more outside of work as a result because you know I don't have to check my email. And lastly, the nice part about this, if you can have these conversations, is we all have sent that email or instant message where we're like, the person didn't respond. Is it okay to follow up now? How long should I wait? And when you've been able to have those conversations amongst a team, if you said emails 24 hours and they didn't respond in 24 hours, it's no longer awkward to send that follow-up message. And so by having those, what seem like simple and awkward conversations more explicitly, you're going to find a lot of benefits, but it feels weird at first. So that's my I dare you.
I like that. That's a great I Dare You challenge. And for everyone listening, again, the name of the book is Ping, The Secrets of Successful Virtual Communication. This is ideal for an executive team, leadership team, as a book study. I mean, there's a lot of game-changing type ways to look at things. And it's also backed up by research, which is really unique and special. So, Andrew, it has really been a lot of fun getting to know you personally, but also learning about this research. I know this book is and will make such a difference. So I appreciate you taking the time and being on I Dare You podcast.
Great. It was an awesome conversation.